All right, everybody, welcome back to Guitar Radio Show. Our next guests have written the what I think is probably the most definitive tome on my hero, Jeff Beck. Unlike other books on Jeff, this one takes us into the psyche of this reluctant rock hero, guitar hero, rock star. The knowing he knew he was a guitar hero, but he was always very cheeky about it and sheepish about it. But this is done in a way that would really have to have anyone else thinking of potentially writing another book on Jeff Beck, saying, "Yeah, you know what? I don't think I'm going to try and touch this subject anymore. I think we're done. There's nothing left to cover." Unless, of course, something happens where, a whole bunch of new material gets released that we haven't heard. But please welcome to the show uh, the authors of Blow by Blow, the Jeff Beck story by Brad Tolinski and Chris Gill. Those gentlemen, Brad and Chris, welcome to Guitar Radio Show.
Hey,
Thanks, Mark. Great to be here.
thanks for having us on.
It's great to have you here. Um, so I know the research here, there was, what, over 300 hours of research? Probably more.
Oh, no, no, 3 years of
3
research
years
up
of
until the very end, basically. I mean, we had we said about 30 hours of interviews. It was probably actually closer to 40 when you really put it all together. Because I kind of when I went back and realized I had a lot of little bits and pieces. I had a lot of short interviews with Jeff that I never really added up. In addition to about six long interviews, including my first one with him, which was 3 hours long. And then we had, of course, all the various people we talked to on top of all that. So it was a lot of research.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead,
and I
Brad.
spoke with Jeff several times too, um, in a bunch of different sort of interesting circumstances. I did a marathon interview with him one time with Billy Gibbons. I did another interview with Jeff with Jimmy Page, where we really talked about their younger days and the days in the Yardbirds together, and as well as talking to him just on his own.
Yeah. Um, One of the things that, I mentioned to you guys this last week when we talked, or the week after last, that I read the book and then I bought the audiobook. And we have to give props to the guy who does the audiobook. He's really good. I can't remember his
Okay.
name, but he's really good. Um, and I've listened to that 5 times now. And one of the things that keeps coming out of there for me is, once again, the fact that you peeled back the layers on the psyche of this person, and that, I have him up on such a high pedestal, as I'm sure you guys do too, that he really had a lot of flaws. And these were things I did not know about him. And the fact that the starting and stopping, this non-committal role to bands, and this whole thing, and it was through his entire career that these starts and stops, these moments of, here's a record that's done and it never got released.
Hmm.
And over this happened. I mean, we're looking at the stuff that he did with the Stray Cats rhythm section, the stuff that
Yeah,
he did with Meyer at the end, the all this material, the Motown stuff,
yeah.
you know.
I
Yeah,
think he wasn't really so non-committal as much as he was. Uh, he had high standards for himself.
Yeah, to the point of his own detriment.
well,
Yes.
I some people look at this as being him being flaky or negative. I really tend to look at his, being sort of erratic, really an extension of his, art of his art. He was always looking for the next thing. And sometimes that required different people to work with different people.
Hmm.
He was more like a jazz artist in that sense, not necessarily how he played, but how he thought. Um, if he was exploring a different kind of music, whether it be funk or hard rock or psychedelia or instrumental music, he needed to find the right guys. And so you could look at that and say, well, he's being flaky about it. But um, I think that that's really part of what made him great was that he did whatever it took in order to make the music right. And that takes guts.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I will have to say, it's like maybe it wasn't so much to his own detriment. We heard some of the tracks that he did for Motown. We were fortunate enough to hear that stuff, and it was pretty disappointing, to be honest.
Wow.
And you can see why he didn't really want to put that out. And I have to say the same thing. You can go on YouTube and you can find some of these rough mixes of the Lukather sessions.
Yeah, I
And it's
have those.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of get it. I can kind of see why he didn't want to do that. It felt like a throwback, and not only that, but it's nothing against some of these guys who do this stuff. It's all good, but it's like it's kind of this watered down, San Fernando Valley, happy jazz as they call it. And
Sun
maybe
Valley
Lukather was a little
guitars.
too deeply immersed in that scene, and Jeff just wasn't his deal. Um, and the Nicholas Meyer thing is compelling. That I do wonder. I bet that was good quality. But we'll never know. But yeah, the Stray Cats rhythm section stuff, I would have loved to have heard what they did. I would have loved to have heard even, the crazy Bob Ezrin session stuff, which sounds completely messed up, but it's probably horrific. But who knows?
Well, we've heard some of the even the outtakes from the Beck Bogert, what was supposed to be the second studio record.
Right, I have that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? It just you can you can almost tell when Jeff isn't feeling it. Like, should he put that out just because it's recorded?
Hmm.
Not really. If it's not good and he has the guts and the option and the money not to put it out if it's not going to be great work. And again, that's why I think we're celebrating him in his career, like his 60 years, is because he just let the best stuff out. I mean, every once in a while, some things that are a little suspect.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Got
there's some tracks
there.
off the Flash record for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
I think Flash, fortunately, you can say that Jeff, you can let him off the hook a little bit because he was kind of forced reluctantly into that project to begin with. And I just know, having talked with him after that, of just how much he hated that. And usually with everything that he's done, he would go through a period of hating stuff. Like there was a period in the late 80s where he hated his fusion records. He hated Blow by Blow and he hated Wired, and he called them in a Guitar Player magazine interview, mistakes on record. But then I talked to him in 1999 and he completely shifted his perspective and said, like, it was an amazing period for me. It was like, he said, like, it was like I'd never played guitar before, and it was magical. And he was very, then he was like very much into it. And of course, he started bringing those tracks out again. And as his career moved along, he started playing more and more of those tracks.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I always tell people I like my rock stars to be partly insane. I don't really hold it against them. It's sort of what we dig about them, is and I think that that's sort of what we're disappointed. We'd like to hear everything that Jeff does. But I think that that's part of the reason, he endears us as well as hard-headed. He's going to do what he wants to do. He's going to make the noises he wants to make, and
Yeah.
and and that's partly what the book is all about.
Yeah.
Is from an outside point of view, you look at some of the shifts that he made, and you sort of scratch your head. But what Chris and I really, the aim of the book was, as you pointed out in the beginning, is to explain, why these transitions made a world of sense behind the scenes. And I
Hmm.
think that that's really what's been missing in terms of stories about Jeff or biography about Jeff is explaining these sudden shifts that when you dig into it, they weren't that sudden at all. A lot of thought went into it, and
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. That's why I love this book so much because it's not just a timeline.
Yeah.
It is as we move through the timeline, we get to dive in and really understand the creative process of what he was doing. And that was something I've never gotten from any of the other books in the past,
And it's
And
Well, I
not
think,
just music, like all sorts of things that would affect his art, whether it
yeah,
was
yeah.
yeah.
I
personal
think
life or he had certain health issues that shifted him in a certain kind of way. And or even discovering a certain thing on a guitar that all of a sudden changes his trajectory,
Mhm.
and all of those things are fascinating and have to be taken into account.
Yeah.
I think too is, part of it is we had a limited amount of space that, our publisher gave us. They said you can write these many words, and we actually went over that by probably 20,000 words, which is a pretty significant chunk. But it's 60 years, of a career. But the other books that had preceded us all had a tendency to just dive into, like you said, a timeline. And then it's like, and they felt like this thing, like we have to list every single session that Jeff did. And you know what? At the end of the day, those things aren't that important. A lot of times it was just a favor or a paycheck,
Hmm.
and it doesn't move the narrative along. And what did move the narrative along was the stuff that those books didn't explore that we got from talking with other people, or they were remnants of some of our previous interviews with Jeff, was the path that he didn't take. There's a tendency in a lot of these stories and articles and interviews with Jeff because, Jeff did big interviews always centered around album projects. And there's these years in between. And there was this tendency to say, like, oh, Jeff just, he walked away from music and was focused on building hot rods. And it's like, well, that really wasn't true. As you found, as we talked to these other people that he was involved with, you found out that he had these projects that were going on, but they just he ended up canning them for whatever reason. And that to me was more fascinating to look at that because that tells you more about where his mindset is as opposed to him doing, going in and doing a session for an hour on some record for some obscure artist out there, And I mean, you can go through his session list and it goes on and on and on and on of all these things. And you listen to a lot of them and you can tell like, yeah, Jeff was just, phoning it in essentially. This is not an essential track to listen to. Not everything Jeff did was necessarily golden.
Hmm.
Um, and there were a few sessions that were golden, and those get mentioned in the book, and especially if there's something relevant to talk about. But when it came down to like, and then Jeff did this session, blah, 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 and he played this thing, and then you describe the solo, and then you move on. It's like, what does that really tell you?
Yeah.
Not much. It's not very illuminating.
Yeah. Um, it's funny as you were saying that you made me think of the Mark Knopfler quote from the book when he talked about the private dancer solo, and and honestly, I don't think it's that bad. I don't think
It's
and
not
if,
that good.
well, okay, if that was according to Mark Knopfler, if that was the second worst second worst solo of all times, what was the first?
Probably Mark's own demo version of it.
Sultans
It's
of
it's
Swing.
funny because it's controversial, and it's I think part of it is too is we just didn't want to be sucking up to Jeff too much and wanted to be a little bit more honest. It's funny because one of my good friends said like, "How could you say that it was underwhelming?" It's like that's my favorite Jeff Beck solo of all time, and
Wow,
it's like
that's interesting.
to each your own.
Yeah.
It's I mean it's I mean, okay, this was our opinion and whatever, but and if you want to argue it, that's fine. I mean, that's it's kind of the tough thing because you can't just be a robot and say like Jeff Beck did a solo on Tina Turner's record and it sounded like this. It's like you have to put some opinion in every now and then. We've gotten called to the mat for some of our descriptions of people not being particularly complimentary, but it's like, these guys aren't fashion models, or whatever. So,
No, certainly not.
Yeah. What do you think is the worst solo of all time?
Of all time? I can tell you what I think is the greatest solo of all time.
okay.
Neil Young's Cinnamon Girl.
Yeah. It's a good
Well,
one.
well,
Because it's just a big
what's
fuck
interesting?
you.
Yeah, yeah.
What's interesting is, uh, I've said in other interviews, I sort of compare Jeff Beck to Neil Young. Their mindset is similar in a way, where they pretty much do what they've always wanted to do. They've gone their own way. They'll quit in the middle of a tour if they aren't feeling it.
Hmm.
He'll switch musicians, if he's not feeling it. And you know, I, like I said, for whatever reason, Neil gets praised as being a rugged individualist or whatever you want to call him, a maverick, and Jeff often gets just called flaky for doing essentially the same thing.
I think of Jeff in a different time period in world history, as he would be someone who would have wielded a battle axe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of, but I mean, he's been my hero since I'm 12.
Wow. Yeah.
And here I am at 64, and still to this day, you know, it's just I still marvel at everything he does. And it's funny. While I was disappointed initially with 18, I go back and I listen to it now, and I go, "This is a man who had finally come to terms with his playing."
Yeah. That's a good analysis.
Well, it is an interesting record. You're referring to his last record, the one that he did with Johnny Depp,
Hmm.
is I approached it with a certain amount of skepticism, like a lot of people did. But while I was doing the book, I mean, one of the fantastic things about being writing books about music is you get paid to sit around and listen to music. I mean, that's a sweet gig, no matter, how you,
Even if it's
and
below minimum wage, but still.
yeah. But anyways, I went back to 18, and we actually interviewed Johnny for a couple of hours for the book as well. And I was pleasantly surprised, but by what I heard. I thought, it's sort of funny. He didn't mean it this way, but it was in many ways sort of a career summation. You had vocal music, you had him touching on the Velvet Underground that he played with when he was in the Yardbirds. You got, these beautiful ballads that he was, known for doing. It was a little bit, I mean, if anything, maybe the criticism that I have of the record, it was a little too all over the place.
Hmm.
But in many ways, it does summarize uh, the entire expanse of his career.
And all the music he loved.
Yeah.
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 I mean, the Motown stuff was being represented there, and you
Beach
know,
Boys.
Beach Boys. I mean, yeah, he, yeah, it really, when I listen to that record now, and I particularly with headphones, it's a good headphone record.
Mhm.
Um, it's one of those records where you go, wow, this is the place where he was really on top of his game. And I got to see him the September before he died,
Mm.
opening for ZZ Top here in Austin. And it was before Johnny had joined the tour.
Right.
So it was all instrumental. And he had Annika
Hmm.
uh, on the
Drums.
tour. And I spoke to do you guys know David Grissom?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
He and I spoke about it afterwards because we were both at that show. And I said, this was otherworldly tonight. He's like, yeah. He goes, it was completely and utterly flawless, and uh, it was one of those magical moments of the music just penetrating everybody in the room,
Mm.
not the room, in the amphitheater,
Right.
and we were both like stymied by it. We were just gobsmacked. Like, what? How is this possible at 78 years old? This person could do this. But really, what it had come to was we were witnessing an artisan, someone who had so hammered out all of the areas and polished it down, and it was like, you know, it was a a samurai sword of sonic
Yeah.
incredibility. It was just amazing. And
He never lost his step. You know, that's the thing.
never.
He never had a moment where he went into decline. It just kept on. It was like, you know, it was like this dynamic just kept on going up and up and up and up.
Yeah.
Well, we made a small point in the book, and looking back on it, I feel like I should have emphasized it a little bit more. But to me, the revelation that I had about Jeff in his last, say, decade, if not 2 decades, was he did transform as a musician and as a guitar player. He did become more exacting. And the way I compare it to is a classical musician. Now, I play violin as well, so I know that, when you play a piece of music, you're thinking about each and every note and what sort of vibrato you want to apply to it, how you want the dynamics of each phrase to be. And, most guitar players, I'm not saying all, but most guitar players, we have our bag of licks and we we do our thing and we'll automatically play like some 10 note sequence that we've practiced. But I don't, and I think that that's what separates Jeff. I don't think he played that way at all, especially towards the end. Like, especially on records live, maybe he took more liberties, but you get the sense that each phrase is being shaped and being thought about. Um, and Chris has got a story uh, in an interview that he did with Simon Phillips. Chris, you
Oh
should
yeah.
probably tell it.
Yeah, it was just it was like Simon and Tony Hymas had just started working with Jeff on There and Back, and they had brought, they were writing songs for him. Simon and Tony were writing songs for him, and I forget which song it was, but they said like, oh, they presented it to him, and Jeff was like, okay, hold on a second, and they were like having tea, typical British thing, and it was at Jeff's house, and Jeff walks into this other room, and says, let me work this out, and it's like a basic melody. And they're saying it's like they heard him doing these three notes over and over and over again, and they both looked at each other like, "What's the deal?" It's like it's really simple, And then Simon realized, well, he's figuring out not just where to play it, because you can on a guitar you can play the same notes, in the same octave on different strings and everything, and they sound different. But he was not only experimenting with that, but just how he played those notes, and just going in depth. Whereas most players would be just, yep, got it, simple, let's move on. But Jeff just he went in just the extra mile to get the most out of those three simple notes.
Mhm.
I mean,
And that's
that's why we talk about Jeff, and we say that he had this incredible trajectory. And almost everybody you talk to will say he just seemed to get better and better and better. And without explaining exactly what they mean by that. And I think really what they mean is that his phrasing, I like to think of it as his focus became a little more on the right hand, on the picking hand,
yeah.
where he came up with this totally original way to use his fingers, the volume knob, and the whammy bar to apply different sorts of vibratos on each note.
Yeah.
And that is also unusual for guitar players. I mean, so much of the focus usually is on the left hand, on the fretting hand,
Yeah.
and Jeff was placing, he could play as fast and he could play those notes and everything, but he was really focusing on this sort of right hand technique that really nobody, um, can do other than him.
Well, and just the use of how, I mean, this is insane because you don't hear this about other guitar players using the flesh,
Hmm.
using his very flesh on the side of his thumb and his hand, and the
Hmm.
way he had the bar floating, and he would, like I was watching, oh, it was Ronnie Scott show, and it was the beginning of Brush to Brush with the Blues when he does a little bit of Goodbye Pork Pie Hat.
Hmm.
Um, And I'm watching and I'm looking and I'm going, oh, because you forget after a while from just listening to the songs. Oh wow, he did that trill with his palm just pushing back and up and down on the bar because the
Yeah.
bar was floating. And I was like, that wasn't even him even touching the bar, touching the trem arm at all. So it was crazy. But like what you were saying about the phrasing, and I saw him, got to see him so many times. One time I saw him do, because we've ended as lovers, in a completely different position than he had done it before. And I was just like, and it sounded exactly the same because he was playing the
Yeah.
same notes in the same register, but he was playing it in a different place on the neck, and I was just like, well, that's trippy. Here I am learning this song, and
Yeah, no, that was Jeff. I mean, because I followed him in '95, to, at least 10 shows, all up and down California and in a few other venues, and watched just how much he would change things around. You don't really realize it because you hear this stuff and it sounds great and everything like that, and you're blown away by it. But there'd be times where he would just go off on a tightrope, and sometimes he would, miserably fall off, without a net and everything like that. But there's other times he'd pull off something brilliant. But then how much he would change around these common songs. I don't know if it was boredom or what it was, but there was just times where he, wasn't content. I mean, he did perfect things. Like "Where Were You" is a perfect example where he
yeah,
he had to play it in a certain way and everything like that. And he talked about what a bind he put himself into to pull it off because it just, to hit some of those harmonics, you've got to be dead on. And your touch has to be perfect and everything. And you've got the left hand touching it really lightly and then everything else going on. And sometimes you have to do a false harmonic with your right hand and all this other stuff, and it's just like it's just crazy. But yeah, it was phenomenal to watch. I mean, just because I had seen him before that, but you see like a one-off show, and you don't really get the whole thing. You don't really doesn't hit you the impact the same way of just what he's doing and how crazy it is.
yeah. Don't you think that track was really kind of the turning point?
Oh, absolutely. For me there was two turning points, and one turning point being "Goodbye Pork Pie Hat."
Yes.
As great as "Cause We've Ended as Lovers" is, it's a great performance and everything like that, but he's still very much digging into, paying tribute to Roy Buchanan and doing the Roy Buchanan thing there. And I think he kind of took that as a leap, as a starting point, as a diving board or whatever you want to call it. And then with "Goodbye Pork Pie Hat," he really comes into his own. And that's where we're starting to hear this transition from the Jeff Beck of the Yardbirds and the Jeff Beck group and everything to the Jeff Beck that we now know for the rest of his career.
Yeah.
But when he hits "Where Were You," that's where that whole concept and approach becomes fully formed.
Hmm.
It's the inspiration of the Bulgarian State Women's Choir, that he's imitating the inflection of. And when you listen to that None Such album, and you go like, oh my gosh, that's where those wavers and those interesting microtonal pitch bends and everything come from. And to realize how well he did that, and that's where the guitar became more of this voice.
Yeah.
It was less of, here are my licks, here is my left hand and right hand stuff. This was now like, okay, these are the sounds I hear in my head, and
Mhm.
I'm trying to make it sound more like something that would come out of my mouth. But I'm doing that through my guitar because I'm not a singer, and it starts with "Where Were You," and it continues on with "Angel Footsteps," and "Nadia,"
Mhm.
and "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," and "Niece and
Day in the
Dorna,"
life.
and it just goes on and on of all these incredible vocalists that he can imitate, like dead on, an opera singer, an classical Indian vocalist. It's amazing. But that was where that really started off, and even the Guitar Shop album in general kind of set a certain template for this shift. And I think to ignore anything that came after Guitar Shop is a big mistake because it's like there's this whole breadth of work that's fascinating,
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah.
And not even counting the rockabilly and the soundtracks and all that other stuff, but just, his Jeff Beck albums.
Hmm.
Fascinating.
Yeah, but like Roy's toy,
Yeah.
it's so simple, but it's so impactful. I mean, he is completely. relying on the groove.
And he's using a ring modulator, and like how many people use a ring modulator in a way that makes musical sense? Like it's
Right,
just not a bunch of dissonant weirdo noise like when Devo does it or something like that.
right.
It's just like no, he's using it and it's like there's a musical phrase in there.
Yeah,
It's not any note that we know in a Western scale,
right.
but he's making musical sense out of it. And it's like, oh
Yeah,
my gosh, it's so damn brilliant.
yeah. Same with Pull It from
Yeah,
Loud Hailer.
yeah.
That's another track is just like when I see oh it was 2017 here in Austin at the Moody Theater. No opening act. He opened with that, and it was Jimmy Hall was on vocals, and he opened with Pull It, and I was just like, you gotta be freaking kidding me.
Yeah.
This is incredible. How does somebody make a ring mod? And I've got a ring mod. How does somebody make a ring mod musical? You've really got to, it's such a weird effect to
Yeah.
tame, to really do that.
It's
It's
like
fun.
those
Go ahead.
tuba throat singers, kind of thing, because you got two
Right, right,
notes kind of going on, but the harmonies aren't
it's,
really, they're not like
right,
we call Western harmonies at all.
right. Like a didgeridoo on acid.
Yeah.
It's absurd. Um, well, I was talking a while back. I was talking to Jennifer Batten, and we both feel the same in that for us the ultimate is like if we had to go ahead and say, okay, I need to play a song, some song of Jeff's to someone who's never heard Jeff Beck before, it would be Goodbye Pork Pie Hat.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about for you guys? What would it be?
Um, yeah, it's always a tough one because, right, Jeff had so many different phases in his career.
Yeah.
But one thing that as beautiful as his ballads were, one thing that I always loved about Jeff was if your playing could have a sense of humor, a lot of his playing has sort of a playfulness and a sense of humor. I mean, going back to Beck's Boogie and things like that, where he's making like these little, his the influence of Les Paul sort of comes out in him, and he's just having fun.
Yeah.
And this might be a little cliche, but my favorite Jeff Beck performance is on Going Down, just because each phrase is so bizarre and hilarious,
Uh-huh.
like literally makes me laugh, but also like, where he's doing those chromatic octaves and all that stuff. Uh, it just sounds like a funhouse mirror to me, that whole song. And I think what's even funnier about it is it's the song that's become a blues standard. And I don't think he plays one damn blues lick in the whole song. It's the perversity of it as
Yeah.
well. It's like, yeah, I know I'm playing a blues song, but I'm not going to play one cliche, one blues idea in this whole damn thing.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Chris?
Oh boy, that's a really tough one, but I will just throw something out there, I guess. I mean, pork pie hat's definitely a very good choice, and that's generally I would tend to agree with you. But since I need to come up with something different, I will choose Angel Footsteps, I think, because that's just the phrasing on that. And again, it seems like a relatively simple melody, but you try and play it, and then when he goes with the slide way up into the nether
With the other
worlds there,
hand,
yeah, and it's just like oh my gosh, and the intonation is dead
dead
perfect,
on. Yeah.
and it's just tiniest little movements, and it's just
Hmm.
like my gosh, this guy had this stuff down. I
Yeah.
don't even think your average, pedal steel player could even get that type of accuracy up in that high range like that. It was just insane.
Yeah.
But and just in overall, I think because there are tonal shifts that go on throughout that, and that's the thing. It's not just like okay, here's a cool sound that I'm doing, and I don't want to cut somebody down, but like say like somebody like Joe Satriani, always with me, always with you. Well, he's just using one single guitar tone, and it's kind of stays static throughout the whole song. But when Jeff does these things, it's just like it sometimes sounds like three or four different players.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
And it just pains me, that, in this discussion too, what ends up disappearing because I love the Truth and the Beckola album so much, like it's a different Jeff Beck, right? It's a different,
Totally.
but something like Rice Pudding is just killer,
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
Yeah,
uh,
I learned how
version
to.
of Shapes of Things with the Jeff Beck group is
Yeah,
just
yeah,
devastating, man.
yeah.
It's killer.
I sat down for a summer with rice pudding, playing it over and over again, trying to learn how to do that thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
All those spaces and those, and once again about the phrasing, right? All of that, not just the hammer of the ba-da-da-da-da, but
right.
it's all that stuff in between. It's
Yeah,
like, you
But
know,
isn't it like isn't that opening riff like literally the heaviest riff ever?
it's the definitive rock and roll riff, really.
yeah,
Not unlike Heartbreaker. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's one of those type of riffs. But going back to what you said, Brad, about the hilarity in some of his playing, when I first heard the live Jan Hammer Jeff Beck record in Freeway Jam, when he does "Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da," like,
right.
are you serious? Who does
Yeah,
who does that? I was like, that I mean, that was what, 77 that record came out.
yeah, yeah,
So I'm 13 and I'm going, I can do whatever I want. He
yeah.
he's telling me I can do whatever I want. And that's when I started to do whatever I wanted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he was coming from this kind of, it was relatively like he was this in a rather lofty position at that time too. He was really revered. Blow by Blow was earning, was selling and was earning him all this acclaim and everything like that. And then he does the Wired album, and that's, on a similar path. And of course, they're recording this album live and everything, in support, semi in support of that record. I mean, he didn't do a whole lot of the Wired album on that tour, but for him to throw that in there was just, yeah, it was really kind of cocky and, was humorous at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. He was just having fun,
Yeah.
you know.
Because you wouldn't hear Al Di Meola or, or any of
No,
these guys doing that.
no, you wouldn't hear Demiola definitely not doing that. Um,
I love even, the later version of Rollin' and Tumblin' is one of my favorite
yeah,
tracks where he takes, this song was written in like originally written in like 1929 or something like that. This old rickety blues song, I
yeah,
mean, Muddy Waters, whatever, and just, basically takes it and kicks it into outer space.
yeah.
It's so it's I don't know if I would call it funny, but it's sort of funny, and it's such a cheeky thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, I just was going to say with the Electronica trio albums, I think are the great overlooked records, and I think a lot of people hear like, "Oh, Electronica, that's not my thing. I'm not going to listen to that." But it's like the packages that Jeff put together were just, they were like about maybe 60, maybe 70% sometimes of that. Sometimes maybe even 50%. So it was like, yes, there are these elements of electronic production and stuff in there, but at the same time, there's these nuggets in there, whether it's Nadia or Angel Footsteps, or whatever. And just I think you're really missing out if you overlook those records just because you
Oh,
think, oh, I don't want to listen to a bunch of club tracks.
yeah. I mean, suspension.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, just amazing, just beautiful.
yeah.
Um, uh, the what ifs that always keep coming back, especially as I was reading this book over and over, and the what ifs. And I know, we could sit here and we can wax philosophically till the cows come home. But when I think back to Beck's Bolero, and which again, the slide guitar on there is just, amazing. And to see him do it live in those later years was just amazing. Um, on that when he came out with that live record, Live Plus, I think it was called.
Right, right, yeah, yeah.
Um, I saw that tour here in Austin as well, opening for ZZ Top as well. And he came out. He started the show with a Telecaster, which was like, this is unheard of. And he was doing McLaughlin stuff. And but he does Beck's Bolero, and it made me think to like the what ifs of, okay, you've got Keith Moon, You've got John Paul Jones, you've got Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck. Who else is on that? Is it Nicky Hopkins?
Nikki. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Imagine if that would have turned into a band. The what if on that?
It's so
Like
hard
your
to say
first
because
supergroup.
Jeff was so volatile at that point.
Yeah.
And Keith Moon, oh my God, I mean,
They would have killed each other.
always volatile. It's so hard to say. What was really fun is I had a chance to talk with Jim McCarty, who was the drummer for the Yardbirds, which, for your listeners who don't know, was Jeff's first really big band.
I hope my
And
listeners know.
and at one very small sliver of time, both Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page played together in that band. And McCarty, I was asking McCarty about the gigs where Jeff and Jimmy both played guitar. Because Jimmy was playing bass for a bit, and then he shifted to guitar when they were both playing guitar. And Jim was just cracking up. He said, we would rehearse this stuff, and and Jimmy would always get up on stage and play what he was supposed to play exactly in the right way. And then Jeff would just go off, and the whole thing would just end up sounding like a gigantic car crash. So, I mean, I think as beautiful as the afternoon was of them recording Bolero, I get the sense that live, first couple of gigs probably would have been okay, and then it would just slowly slid off into chaos somewhere. It would have been fantastic to see, but
Yeah. 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 Really interesting. I mean, I love that track so much. It's such a one of those. It's another one of those tracks I'd say, hey, just want to hear Jeff Beck? Check this out. This is
Yeah,
a
yeah.
cool track.
well, you hear really, I mean, how brilliant Jimmy Page was going to be as a producer,
Yeah.
because it's a beautiful sounding,
Hmm.
record. I mean, you hear Led Zeppelin 1 all over it in terms of like
Yeah.
the echoes and stuff.
Yeah, for
If
sure.
Keith Moon hadn't broken the microphone halfway through the song, it would even
Right.
get better.
Totally. Um, when we spoke last, uh, I had briefly, just quickly mentioned the music from Free Creek, and Brad, you had said that you just said, and I didn't press you for it at the time. You said, "Yeah, that really drove me crazy." Uh, Tell me what
Yeah,
you mean by that.
I had a hard time. Like, one thing that we really tried to do in this book is if we were going to print something, that it was, to the best of our knowledge, the absolute truth. And Chris is always great at holding both of our toes to making sure that we're not just amplifying bullshit, which is a lot of what happens out there. And I dug into music from Free Creek as much as I possibly could, and I'm still not certain that I found the right story, because that was one where Jeff told it a bunch of different ways. Um, but I do think what is interesting about music from Free Creek is it's really the first time that you hear Jeff going into that funk direction, that he was, that's what was on his mind. And he got a chance to exercise it a little bit on that record. And I found it fascinating for that reason. Um, I tried to tell that story the best I could with the facts that I had. And that's what I was referencing, was it drove me a little nuts because I spent a lot of time going down the rabbit hole on that one.
Mhm.
And I would have probably I would have probably spent more time on it in the book if I was certain of all the various facts around it.
Yeah. It was one of the first bootlegs I think I got of Jeff's. And as I showed you guys last week, I've got a lot of bootlegs of Jeff.
Ah,
Um, and I remember, like, his Working in a Coal Mine is on there, you know. which is bizarre, you know. And I mean, I love the original, and I love Devo's version.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Um, but to hear that, it was like, wow, this is really
I
weird.
actually had that single when I was a kid.
The Devo version or the original?
No, the original.
The original. It's such a great track.
I was a little kid and I was just like, wow,
Did
what
Lee
is this
Dorsey
all
write that?
about? This is so dark.
It's so good. Yeah. I mean, is that a Lee Dorsey track? Did he write that, Lee Dorsey? Was that?
I don't know. I don't know,
I have
to
to
be
look that
honest
one
with
up.
you. It's a good question.
Yeah. So let's talk about real quick. You go into depth, which is wonderful because nobody has ever gone into depth about the Rotterdam sessions and the potential of the of Jeff, you know, joining the Stones. Now, I never knew it was Keith that rang up Jeff. I always thought it was Mick that had rung up Jeff for this. So that was interesting because the fact that they really didn't cross paths a whole bunch of times, and there's Keith asking, you know, Jess to come down like they've been friends for their whole lives. Um, was there a lot of information? I mean, because I have those sessions on tape. I even have the ones with, I even have the Ronnie demos.
Right.
I have there's a Peter Frampton demo, which is god awful,
Yeah.
and um, but like you guys describe in the book, it was doomed at the beginning. I mean, to do those chugging, you know, 12 bar, that blues chugging, you know, and then him playing Freeway Jam across it. Oh my Lord, that's horrible.
It's horrible, isn't it horrible? It's
It,
just, it's like, it sounds like it should be like for some like goofy 1930s cartoon, with early Mickey Mouse or something like that. Yeah.
it's
Well,
horrible.
it's funny. I spoke to Keith, uh, not long after Jeff passed away. I did an interview with him around the Hackney Diamonds record,
Yeah.
and I brought up Jeff. And I mean, Keith might have invited him, but I think afterwards, he put it very succinctly to me. He goes, "Look, uh, Jeff is an incredible guitar player, but he is he is first and foremost his own man, and the Stones are a group." And it was never going to really work because Jeff was always going to want to do things his way, and we do things as a band.
Hmm.
And, you know, I think there's more to it than that. I mean, I think that Jeff, the expanse of his vision was much bigger than, say, what the Rolling Stones would do. That's not to put down the Stones. I mean,
Hmm.
there's nobody better at doing what the Stones do than the Rolling Stones.
Hmm.
One of my favorite all-time records, if not my favorite all-time record, is Exile on Main Street. So I love the Stones. But Jeff, especially at that time in his career, was exploring these jazz avenues and these sort of progressive rock ideas. And he would have been frustrated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he would have been like a tiger in a cage. It would have
Yeah.
been horrible.
I think too that he knew what he was sitting on because I mean, you got to remember Blow by Blow was in the can,
Yeah.
when he went and did that, and it was kind of just a whim. It's just, I think for Jeff was just like, well, let me just go. It's a great opportunity. It's kind of like
Yeah.
you found the
Weekend in
winning lotto
Hawaii.
ticket or something like that, and it's like, do I really want to be, it's almost like this, fork in the road type of situation to him. Do I want to be insanely rich but unhappy, or do I want to be the starving artist, or whatever? But he turned out not to be the starving artist. But I think he had enough confidence in what he had done. And I think he realized that there's no way for me to kind of showcase that side of me if I go out with these guys. I'm going to have to put that on the back burner. And he was really proud of that record, rightfully so. And I think he realized, especially when he did that version of Freeway Jam with those guys, that he's just like, this ain't gonna work.
I mean, Freeway Jam, as Chris pointed out, is, basically a riff on a Miles Davis
Yeah, and
tune
right off.
on Right Off. And
I'm glad you brought that up.
I don't think I don't think the Rolling you won't confuse the Rolling Stones rhythm sections with the Miles Davis rhythm section.
Yeah, with
That's
Billy Cobham, and McLaughlin and
It's a whole different ball game.
yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm glad you brought right off up because once again with this book, I'm so thankful for this book, guys. You have no idea because it allowed me also to go, oh, I need to go listen to that again.
Yeah.
Those influences. So I went back and I really kind of immersed myself in that whole Jack Johnson project.
it's such a great
It's
record.
it's just it's crazy. And the interesting thing, especially with Right Off, you can hear the sonic influences right down to the mix,
Oh yeah, completely.
right down to the freaking mix and mic placements. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
crazy.
It's uncanny. It's uncanny when you hear it like side
Yeah,
by side and you just go, "Oh my gosh, that's just."
yeah.
And I
Well,
actually put together a Spotify playlist where,
yeah,
now you can do it. You don't have to go search for it. It's right there. You can go in between
yes,
the two, you know.
yes.
But
Yeah.
it's important to also say, you know, in Jeff's way, like he definitely borrowed the feel and the groove and and the sound. But he ends up doing his Jeff Beck thing with it, right?
Well, that's
He puts in a great melody, he puts in a great hook, he makes that vibe accessible to his rock audience.
There you go. You got it. That's exactly right. I was going to say, and I was saying this to my co-host the other day. I was saying the thing that Jeff did was he was inspired by that moment, that sonic moment, and he went ahead and he made it digestible for the masses.
Well,
And the
the
timing
quote
was
that
perfect.
the quote that he said, I believe, and I'm paraphrasing it, I'll probably get it close, but not exact, was that it simplified Mahavishnu and complicated rock and roll.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why it's a masterpiece.
Yes.
Um, and it is interesting because we're so far away from that moment. And younger fans of Jeff Beck or musicians that come to Blow by Blow and they listen to it and they go, "Gee, how could this have been this instrumental sort of fusion record been a hit record back in the day?" But you look at what was going on in rock music and how there were so many people at that time exploring different avenues. I mean, you did have progressive rock bands that were, incorporating classical music into rock and roll and,
Mhm.
people messing around with jazz and jazz musicians messing around with rock. It was an incredibly, musically fertile time, which, oh my God, it sort of makes my heart ache a little bit thinking about what popular music was, not pop music, but popular music was back then and sort of how it is now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's funny because the Blow by Blow and Wired that rearranged my DNA. Because before that, it was Zeppelin, it was Kiss, it was all this stuff, and all of a sudden I was like, well, wait a minute, there's something else. So I was like, I started to learn and I started to read, and I found, oh, here's Stanley Clark, oh, here's Lenny White,
Hmm.
oh, here's Keith Jarrett, and then I found the ECM label, and I was just like, oh no, here we go, you know,
Yeah.
and I went down that rabbit hole. So it changed everything for me, and because Jeff made that accessible in a way, and it was so funny, that record was mixed and mastered in such a way that I mean, are you both from New York? I'm originally from New York.
I'm not
Uh,
from New York. I've lived in New York for a long
Okay.
period of time.
So back in the 70s in New York, there were stereo stores, high end, blah punk, Alpine,
Oh, I remember those. Yeah.
all those, and those were the guys who were wearing the guys who were selling it were wearing Jordache jeans and polyester shirts, and they were playing Blow by Blow
Yeah.
in the store, and they were playing Asia, and they were playing, early Doobie Brothers, all these records that were really, really mixed really, really well,
Yeah.
you know. And it was one of those audiophile records. Like I just the other day, and once again in preparing for this, I went and I said, "What are the top 10 audiophile records of the 70s?" And Blow by Blow was one of them, because of the way it was put together and the way it was
Yeah.
mixed. So yeah, it's amazing and how it came.
Caravanserai was another one of those great
Which
sounding
one?
records. Caravanserai, that Santana record,
Yeah, there you go.
is a
Yeah.
uh, beautiful sounding record.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so the last chapter in the book uh, was so when Jeff passed, it put me in a funk. And I had a lot of conversations, phone calls with Andy Ellador, and I told him, I said, I just don't want to listen to music. I certainly can't listen to Jeff right now. I just can't do it. And it was like, that's how much this particular guitar player and musician meant to me. And it was just really, it wasn't until Andy had sent me some early demos of his later on record in Dream, which kind of brought me out of the funk of it all. And it's really one of those records that kind of pulled me back into being able to listen to other music. And um, it was really a difficult time. And going into that last chapter, you guys brought me back there to that moment, which was really rough. And the epilogue, of course. But um, when you pulled me out of it again when you guys did that Jeff's Guitar Garage. And so thank you for doing that because if you would have left me there, you know,
True.
I mean, it was still, it was like, okay, whew, okay, thank God. Because I was like, I literally was, when I was reading, I was like, oh my God, this can't be the end. I was like, moving forward, like, oh, thank God there's more. Okay.
Well, it's funny because the Guitar Garage initially we were going to intersperse it, kind of with the relevant chapters
Right.
to a certain degree. Now some of the stuff crosses over timelines, so it didn't quite fit. But I think when our guy at our publisher was reading through it, he was kind of like, it just seems like it's out of place, like it breaks up the flow of the book too much. So it's like, well, yeah, let's just put it in the back, and it turned out to be a great thing. I mean, for numerous reasons.
Yeah.
One, because it does kind of bring you off this really depressing, ending and everything like that, and kind of brings you back into the light a little bit. But also because, Brad and we're guitar guys, and a big part of our audience, the majority of our audience is going to be fellow guitar players, and they're going to want gear details, but your average, fan out there isn't going to be so interested in some of the finer details that we felt like, yeah, we needed to kind of remove that a little bit. Because that was a big criticism of the Eddie Van Halen book. Now with Eddie though, it's a big part of who Eddie was. Eddie was a gear tinkerer. He loved to, that just it was his personality,
Mhm.
and everything was to mess around with guitar design. So you have to have that in the midst of his life story. With Jeff, it did feel good to kind of remove it a little bit. And I would say for someone out there saying like, oh yeah, I'm not a gear person, I'll just skip that altogether. Don't, because there's good stories in there.
Absolutely.
It's not just technical things about pickups and string gauges and varieties of whammy bars and specs and whatever. There's also just, the story of the wired Stratocasters and how the two got stolen is great. Even just the searching for the proper Gretsch Duojet, that he went through, where just you didn't have this information. He was kind of winging it and figuring it out. Is interesting. And just some of these other stories, I just think, it's not as dry as you would think.
Yeah. Well, and just the fact that I had no idea that McLaughlin had given Jeff that 66 that on the cover of Wired. I had no idea.
As far as we know, that's the one on the cover of Wired, and we don't
Right.
know for certain because
Right.
there was basically three guitars in play, and that's funny because just as I was coming online, somebody had posted this photo of like Jeff allegedly in San Diego Golden Hall with this white Strat, which I don't recall him playing at all on the tour with McLaughlin. Now, granted, I haven't seen every photo of every show and everything like that, but I don't know how this guy figured out it was from Golden Hall. Even the shirt that Jeff's wearing doesn't look, it looks like from an earlier period to me. But I was just
He
saying,
did play a strat with Beck Bogart and Appice.
well, yes, he did, yes, with Beck Borg and Appice and
Yeah.
with Jeff Beck 2 group. He played, the White Strat and the naked stripped down Strat
Right.
as well. But this picture was like, but it's like it's not the Strat McLaughlin gave him because the whole incident that happened, and it's very well remembered by John McLaughlin, was that it was in Albuquerque where his double neck fell off the table and split in half. And then the next night, his backup guitar broke, and so Jeff loaned him this Les Paul Deluxe. So it's like that San Diego show was before that. So it's like it couldn't have been then, but it's just figuring out the timeline of everything, And when I was working on the Christie's auction, I actually helped them out with the Jeff Beck guitar auction because they're trying to figure out the stories of all these things. And like, well, the when did the McLaughlin guitar get stolen? Because when Jeff told it in his Becco One book, he kind of mixed the two guitars up, and I think he said that the McLaughlin guitar actually got stolen when he went to Ronnie Scott's and he had it in a hot rod, and it turns out it was the other way around. It was when he went to go see Jan Hammer and work on Blue Wind, and and start their collaboration together. That he had it shipped over by the airlines, and the airlines somebody took off with it. They popped it out of the case and sent the empty case on its way
Right.
and everything. So, and it was the 70s one that got stolen out of the hot rod. But that's the thing with Jeff is you have to go and figure this stuff out, and he doesn't really remember details. Like he's not encyclopedic about this stuff. So he personally would mix stuff up. So no one knows what the white Strat is on the cover because you can't see the headstock
Right.
in the photo. And I've even looked for outtakes and everything like that, and there's nothing that shows the headstock, which would help get you at least part of the way there.
Right. So we don't know if that one was actually early 60s or Sharkhead.
Right, right, exactly. So, and even then, Jeff would change necks
That's
on
true.
guitars too, and even the white 60 Strat that he had, that he bought the third one and finally stayed with him to the end.
Right.
When he went to Japan with Stanley Clark, he had this black pick guard on it. There's these, famous shots you've seen of Jeff in the late 70s playing this white Strat with a black pick guard with three little switches on it, and it was Schecter. Even though in the catalog it says Seymour Duncan. Here we're getting into nerdy gear details, but I had to go through that because I'm looking at the photos and going like, the paddles are different on it. And the thing that threw me off because it was stamped on the back and like it had a model designation, and Seymour wasn't using model designation for his pickups in the late 70s. So I said this has to be a later thing in there. And Seymour's just taking credit that, this is like his pickguard assembly. And then I came across an ad in Guitar Player magazine for Schecter, and it shows that pickguard assembly. And at the very top, it says, they have a bunch of artists kind of around the border. At the very top where your eye goes to, it says Jeff Beck. And it's like, there we go, was the Schecter. And the Japanese said it was the Schecter in the 70s reports and blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
But that's the thing. It's like these guys they don't remember that stuff. So it's up to us to have to go through and dig and look at the photos and get the microscope out and,
Yep.
play the little game like you did at the diner with the little, find your way out of the maze type of stuff or word search or whatever.
So long story short, all the guitar nerds that are out there, and I'm sure that there's plenty,
On this show, yeah. On this
witness
show.
the selection you have on your own wall. Uh, is We have plenty of stuff for you in the book.
There's enough stuff in there. Yeah. And
Oh,
again,
yeah.
it's myth debunking, that's part of it. And it's
Yeah.
like, I like the people at Christie's they do very good work and they have to do a lot of work under a very short period of time. But when I saw that, I couldn't let that slide because they put in the catalog when they sold that 60 Strat, the original black pickguard, done by Seymour Duncan. And I know Seymour told him that. And it's like, I like Seymour. He's a good friend and everything like that. But dude, you just, the one that was originally on there, all those photos that we lusted after when Fernandez made its copies in Japan that they sold, that it was a Schecter assembly. And if you've heard those recordings, it's like, oh my God, that's godly strat tone. That's like the biggest, fattest strat you ever heard. And it's like, and I want that. And those things are now $1,000 for that pickguard assembly, but I'm gonna buy one, damn it, when I find one.
The speaking of Christie's and that auction, when it was live, of course, I sat down and watched the whole 4 hours of it, and I went and I bought the catalog because I had to have it. Um, At any point in time, did either of you say, "Hmm, I should maybe think about bidding on some of this stuff," or was
Oh,
it?
I was in the deep of it. I was in the deep of it from the get-go. I was bidding on the Marshall Head, that
Uh-huh.
one, the one of a kind, that I swear that has to be the amp that Jeff used to record Truth. If not Truth, at least the second Jeff Beck Group album.
Right.
I know it was in the mix somewhere, and I know it was important to Jeff. And I think they didn't even realize the magnitude of that amp head and what it was. And I stuck up to about $20,000 before I bailed out, and I now, in retrospect, wished I kept on going. I bid on some of the Ibanez prototypes
Mm,
because that's the first brand new guitar I bought was basically an Ibanez Musician, that was basically a modification of the Ibanez Musician model.
yeah.
But that was sentimental to me, and the fact that it was Jeff. And also, I saw those guitars at Jeff's house when I interviewed him the first time, all collecting dust up in his attic.
Right.
There was a few other things I bid on. I mean, there was obviously stuff well out of my range, like the Oxblood and that 60 Strat and the Tina guitar and on and on. But there was a few items there that you know, I knew what they were and what they meant, and did my best and lost out on every single one of them. It
It's
just
not. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
it got too rich for me. It was like it was like can I really justify spending this much? And now it's like I look back at the Ibanez prototypes and think like, you know what, I should have just stayed with it because it's like they are what they are. They're one of a kind.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Um, there was one, he had one left-handed guitar. It was that flip over that he did for
Right.
the Hendrix tribute thing. And I was just like, this would be perfect for me. And they had started the bidding in the catalog at between 6 and 7 thousand pounds. And but when it went to the block, it was already at I think 11 or 12.
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, well, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, there's pre-game. There's a lot of pre-gaming going on and everything with a lot of those items, so that they already had people who called in and offered money
Yeah.
and everything. It's fascinating because I've done a lot of work with Christie since, and just to see how the process works and everything. And boy, it's like if you're thinking of selling a guitar, if you've got something that's of value, that has a celebrity association, especially, they're the place to do it. I mean, unfortunately, we just saw this backstage auctions thing with these Z Clark guitars that these that he built for Eddie Van Halen, and Eddie had actually played on tour, and the numbers were underwhelming on them.
Really?
But if it had been like at Christie's, it probably would have gone for 5 times as much, I bet,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they have the right audience.
Yeah. It's yeah, definitely. It's all about marketing.
Yeah, it is, and it is. Yeah. I mean, that's you got to get in front of people. It's just like with us with the book,
Yeah.
why we're out here like talking with you and everybody, yeah, that we can to
Yeah.
get the word out there because it's like there's so much noise out there.
Yeah.
It's
Oh yeah.
how do you get through to people?
It's so true. It's true. It's white noise. It's all white noise.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm looking through my, I have my entire list here of stuff that I wanted to talk to you guys. Oh, when we spoke last, we briefly just chatted about, and I still can't find it, and I hope you guys can find it. I'm trying to find the actual performance that Jeff did on the 52nd Grammy Awards when he did How High the Moon with Imogene, not Imogene,
Right.
with Imelda, and I can't find it anywhere. I don't understand why I can't find that. It was where at the end, Stephen Colbert came up and said, and he was like pointing to his daughter in the front row, and he goes, "You see that guy? He has the highest score on Guitar Hero, and he's never played the game."
Right, right, right. Yeah,
Um,
it must be a broadcasting rights thing, I guess. It's probably, I mean, who knows? It could be a performance rights things. I don't know. YouTube seems to kind of not really care too much about some stuff, but it's probably just whoever, the broadcaster was just chose, they just might have chose not to put it out for whatever reason.
and that performance was spot on. I remember sitting on the edge of my seat on the couch going, he's nailing it perfectly. Everything is perfect here.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
All the overdubs,
Yeah.
you know.
Just amazing. Yeah. I
Oh,
really want
it
to
was
find it.
Donald Trump that took it down because he doesn't like Colbert, I think. That's blame it on him.
He doesn't like Les Paul.
He doesn't.
Yeah.
That's absurd. Um, what do you want people to know? What's the one thing you want people to know so they say, "Oh, I've got to read this book"?
Well, also, I guess I'll start. I think Jeff Beck gets kind of doesn't get the credit he deserves as an instrumentalist. There's a lot of talk about him being a guitarist, and I feel like that limits him too much because Jeff transcended the guitar in a way that very few guitar players have. And there's a lot of talk, especially in classical circles, about all these great instrumentalists. Yo-Yo Ma, Itzhak Perlman, you can go on down the list, go back to Paganini even or whoever. Jeff belongs in that category. He deserves to be esteemed as much as these great instrumental performers. And yet, because he's kind of in this so-called ghetto of rock and roll, that he kind of gets cast aside, and then people look at it and say like, "Oh, well, how many gold records did he have?" Or whatever. I mean, granted, he did win a lot of Grammys, so the industry definitely admired him and respected him. But I think it is to look at him as this important historical figure who really opened up the boundaries for guitars. But the only problem with Jeff is that he took it so far that nobody else can sound like him.
Mhm.
I mean, you don't see 8 and 12-year-old kids out there doing spot on imitations of Jeff Beck like you do of any number of guitar players out there. With Jeff, it's few and far between, and even some adults, and even some guy posted up a very nice Jeff Beck inspired thing, and he had a bit of that vibe to it, but and it was great, but it wasn't Jeff Beck, and Jeff Beck is singular, and I think that's what we want people to realize is like go and listen to this guy's music. It has been woefully underrepresented over time. And I think that's the ultimate goal. That's why I put together the Spotify playlist to go along with the book, which it's yeah, unfortunately I thought of it after we printed it. It should have been in the book and the page. Like if you want to find out more about Jeff's music or read, to hear the music that as you're reading about it and you're curious. But that's the great thing from a lot of people who've read the book and said like, had to stop and go listen to this song, the way you guys described it. And it's like, good, mission accomplished, because that's what I think is the ultimate goal is for people to really listen to his work and seriously consider it and know the context of it and how it fits into history.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's sort of been the subtext of probably Chris and I, our life's work, if you will, maybe the
Yeah.
last 30 or 40 years is, at first rock and roll was sort of this novelty, um, thing for kids, but then it grew, developed, created its important artists. And it is even frustrating to some degree where you still hear, say, a Miles Davis or Thelonious Monk being held. I mean, those guys need to be held in the highest of esteem. But, rock guys like Jeff Beck, uh, Jimmy Page, Clapton, these guys, I mean, they really contributed to the culture in a very, very serious way. And it needs to be considered as such. And I think what Chris and I set out to do is um, to to really present these guys for the ages. When people that are into music go back and they want to try to understand what this was all about and the impact that it had on music and the culture, that they could go to one of our books and find out about whether it's Eddie Van Halen or whether it's Jeff Beck, like what's the real story?
Hmm.
Because it is important. It just is.
Yeah.
And it's as important as, classical music or jazz music or anything else that you want to put. I mean, this rock and roll thing, it's been going on for a really long time. People seem to really like it and feel like it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, the book's been out for over a month now, and we've gotten some criticism from people. And usually the criticism goes like, "Oh, well, I don't really know much about his personal life." and blah blah blah. And it's like, that's save that for Motley Crue, or whoever, because Jeff did important work and he was an important instrumentalist. And it's like, again, bringing up the classical guys, do we really want to know who Yo-Yo Ma dated? Do we want to know who Itzhak Perlman slept with? Or that he went to some party and got drunk and did whatever. It's like, no, you don't. You respect these people. You hold them up to a higher standard. And okay, Jeff had a bit of rock and roll tendencies and stuff like that, but that's really not who Jeff Beck, that's not why he's important.
Yeah.
And we had a limited page count. We had to concentrate on why is this guy important? Why do we want to immortalize him in a book that's going to be around after nuclear Armageddon? And new primitive cultures are going to pick it up and go like, who was this guy? It's like, oh, he was sexually promiscuous, or whatever. It's like, no, it's like, what is this? Where were you? What is this goodbye pork pie hat? Oh, let's see if we can find that. Hey, look, we dug this thing. We found this metal disc, or whatever. Figure out a way to decode that. So, but it was to concentrate on what's important. Why are people fascinated with Jeff Beck? Why is Jeff Beck famous? It wasn't because of his personal life details.
There's a couple of blondes in the book if you
There's
want to
there's
know
enough in
about
there.
those.
And I think that's one early review we got. I think the person hit it on the head. It's like you got enough of a glimpse into his personal life, but not enough that you started to feel a little bit uncomfortable
Mhm.
about it, And today we didn't want to go there. And Jeff never went there. I've told people this frequently that I had this incredible interview with Jeff in 1999 where he got personal, and he talked about why the reason it took him so damn long to do a proper follow-up to Guitar Shop, which was who else? It was 10 years. And he said, I was going through relationship problems. And he told me this stuff. We drank a bunch of beer and everything like that. And see, it was crazy because it was for a Japanese publication. Maybe that's part of the reason why he was open. Also, I think because I had developed a good relationship with Jeff over those 10 years. Um,
And you
but,
guys are drinking Beck's beer too,
and we're
so
drinking Beck's beer, pounding them down. But he referred to these relationships, but as we were starting the book, I was telling Brad, it's like, I don't know who he's talking about because Jeff doesn't mention any names. And I even thought back to when I first met Sandra when I went over there in late 92. I wasn't even sure if that was Sandra at all. Like I had to dig up pictures of her from that period and match from my memory because he never introduced me to her properly. So I was going through that transcription of that interview and listening to it, and it took me about 6 months to finally piece together exactly what was going on with him. Because he talked about the tabloids and some of this other stuff, and it's like, God, it's not like, tabloids is automatically in the trash. People don't really keep that online or stuff, but I figured out enough to piece it together. But I figured out he was talking about three women as if he was talking about one woman. So that's how coded and guarded he could be about this stuff. So anybody who wants to write something about the personal secret life of Jeff Beck, well, good luck, because I don't even think I mentioned stuff to Jennifer Batten, who was around at that time period when I did that 99 interview with him, and she knew less than I did. And she was around him, on a much more daily basis than I was. So it's like, boy, if she didn't know, then who knows? I don't even know if Sandra knows a lot of, his stuff. He had a lot of secrets. So very private guy.
Yeah, and I think that also comes from being British. That they do tend to keep things. I lived there for 2 years, and they all kept things very close to the vest.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
far as they're very, they're more demure than us Americans. As far as letting it all hang out.
Yeah.
to be honest with you, I mean, it's just more of, I guess, where I'm coming from and Chris. I always loved the fact that we were able to work at Guitar World magazine. At one point, uh, people would ask me like, "Well, you guys are doing so well. Don't you want to progress? Like, don't you want to work at Rolling Stone or one of these other magazines?" And I was like, "I don't. No, I don't really have any desire to do that because, like, I'm a music nerd. I mean, I'll just say it. Like to me, the personal life of people." It does affect the art, so it's relevant. But I would much rather focus on, what's going on in music. I do think, uh, we do talk about that stuff in the book, but we do it within a musical context.
Yeah.
I mean, you do find that Jeff was affected by certain relationships and he was affected by certain illnesses, and these things come into play in his relationships with the other musicians. Um, so it all depends what you want. I think Chris and I were a little bit taken aback by one criticism that basically was suggesting that we didn't go into his bedroom enough. And I was just sort of like, well, I don't know. I wasn't really all that interested.
No, and I think that's the thing. And it's, I think part of it too is like, I think, okay, if you're writing a bunch of love songs and stuff like that, and we do have artists, or you have like Layla or something like that, for example. And okay, sure, there's context there, but Jeff was an instrumentalist. So that stuff doesn't really affect, he's not writing lyrics, lovelorn lyrics or whatever of this, of pining for somebody that you can't get or, whatever. Um, so that doesn't affect him. But I think what was more interesting, and you know what, we are personal in the intermusician dynamic that goes on. And that's a hell of a lot more interesting what went on in the studio than what went on in his bedroom, I
Hmm.
think, and that's again, that's important in relation to his work.
Hmm.
And we do get into these dynamics
Yeah.
of people, and I found it funny, just like from Simon Phillips talking about the Bob Ezrin project when Tony Hymas shows up and he's so immersed in his new wave persona that he only wants to play a monophonic strap-on guitar. And it's like, and we can't work with that because we need chords underneath this music. And it's like, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I'd rather hear about that than some bimbo he slept
Yeah.
with.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think criticisms like that and opinions like that are neither. You know what I mean? It's just like, I think that's I think it's the state of the times that we live in.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah, definitely.
Jeff
Yeah.
Beck, Jeff Beck wasn't or isn't and will never be John Mayer.
Yeah,
You know
exactly.
what I mean? We're
Yeah.
interested in, we're interested in like, oh, John Mayer's, he slept with Jennifer Aniston. I just heard that the other day. I didn't even know.
Right, right.
And I was just like, who gives a shit?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't care.
yeah.
Eventually, John Mayer will get around to sleeping with everyone. Like he'll just be at your door one day.
Yeah, one day he's like, I'm here to sleep with you. It's your turn. You're on the list.
I need some guitar radio loving.
But I think that's it's part of it too, is because I mean,
Here, hold this silver sky.
I don't want to criticize John Mayer too much, but I think part of it is that you know what, a lot of these people are pop stars today. I'm going to sound like the old man yelling at cloud here, but
Get off my
they
lawn.
don't really make interesting music. So we have to delve into their personal lives for something to talk about. I mean, I'm sorry, Taylor Swift,
Oh,
but it's like people are so obsessed with, who she's dating and blah, 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 and this, that, and the other, and whether she had ranch on her chicken nuggets. And it's like, yeah, you know why? Because the music's fucking boring.
no. Well, when soul gets extracted, you know, out of the music, it becomes merely just a product.
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
that's all it really is. It's like we were talking earlier about the Stones around the time of when Mick had left, Mick Taylor had left, and they were looking for. This is the transition period where the Stones are becoming a conglomerate.
Yeah,
They're becoming an enterprise. Much in the same way, like bands like Kiss. You know
yeah.
what I mean? When I, the best thing that ever happened that I thought was the most ironic and ridiculous thing is when Kiss put out a transistor radio with their faces on it. Meanwhile, they never got played on the freaking radio. It was like
Yeah.
you can listen to that all the time, and you'll wait till the cows come home. Dinosaurs will be back by the time that Kiss gets played on the fucking radio. It was so stupid. You know, so in this time period that we're living in now with your Taylor Swifts and look, John's a very good guitar player.
No, he is. Yeah, and I
He's
don't
a
mean to
very
demean
good
him in that
guitar
group,
player.
but yeah,
But I think when he goes for a solo, I think there's some soul there.
yeah.
But but as far as a lot of the music that is the vehicle for that solo is kind of
Blah.
tepid,
Yeah. True.
as my British friends would say. Oh, that tea is tepid.
Yes.
And I really hope he doesn't come to my house to have sex with me. I really do.
You
Just the
gave him your
idea.
address.
But no, I think those type of opinions where people want to know that stuff is just, I think that's just nonsense. I mean, once again, it's just the state of the times and what people have gotten used to, and that we live in a 3-second world
Yeah.
of sound bites. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
And he's the most difficult character if you want that kind of thing, anyways. I mean, I've had Eddie Van Halen tell me stuff, most of it off the record, and everything like that. But Jeff was just, he had that zipped up. I mean, come on, he lived, a good hour south of London in the countryside on 80 acres of property, in this house in the middle of all that, where it's like, it was like, even King Arthur's knights would have problems penetrating, the barrier there or whatever.
yeah.
Somehow, some of the tabloid reporters, when he was going through that episode in the mid '90s, did, and that bummed him out tremendously. But it's like, he was exceptionally private.
Yeah.
He told me about how he wouldn't even go out to his local pub, to have a drink or a night out or whatever without, because it's like somebody would be there bugging him about singing, Hi-Yo Silver Lining to him. It's just like he just really liked privacy. And again, bringing the Johnny Depp thing, why did those two guys get along? One, they were both kind of eccentric. Two, their sense of humor. And three, they both really relished their privacy. In fact, I find it so ironic that the first song they did together was Isolation during the COVID epidemic, because it's like, you two guys have built a fortress of isolation around yourselves, and it's like, and here you're
You
bemoaning it.
rather enjoy your isolation.
You do, you guys, you revel in it. You
I
guys
do.
made this record because of your isolation,
That's so
you
true.
know?
It's so true. But it's interesting because you talk about the what you were willing to disclose. I think with the Jeff Beck book and with Eruption, your Van Halen book, your Ed book, because that's an Ed book. Um, you gave me just enough to hear the music in a different way. That's the cool part. To me, that's what I would say to people who haven't read this book, and I have said this to people. I was just talking to Tom Guerra from Vintage Guitar Magazine, and I was telling him, "Have you read this thing yet?" He goes, "No, it's on the way." I was like, "Oh," I said, "Just hide away and don't talk to anybody. Just go and look. Just go and read the book, and don't talk to anybody till you're done." I
Well,
says,
I think it's the key to this thing, and this is where I see the flaw in some of the other books, and I won't mention any names, but I could tell by reading them that they never saw the video because what they write is not what happened.
right,
They didn't listen to some of the music because what they're describing isn't what I'm hearing on the tracks, and we
right.
made sure that if we wrote about something, that we knew what the hell we were talking about.
Mhm.
We dug up the stuff. I mean, it's like even writing about the Motown thing, Brad was fortunate enough to be able to dig up these, the engineer and get to hear the Motown track.
I
So,
want to hear these tracks so bad.
unfortunately, you probably won't. And that's the sad thing about all this unreleased Jeff Beck stuff is that he stipulated not to have any of that stuff released. So we're not going to hear. I know Narda's hoping to put out this blues record, but from what I know of what Jeff's, last will and testament was that if it wasn't released during his lifetime, it's not to come out.
Wow.
So, and I think the Moon River thing was an exception, but that was, I think, because there was an agreement, already in place to release that at some point.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
why it did come out. But
Yeah.
all this other stuff, these the Lukather sessions, the Ezrin stuff, the Stray Cats rhythm section stuff,
The Myers
on and
thing.
on and on and on,
Yeah.
the Nicholas Meyer stuff. We'll probably never hear it.
Yeah. Did
I'll
you
tell
guys
you
get
this.
to see?
I'll tell you this about the Motown sessions, just
Yeah.
real quick to help you to help
Yeah. Quell my.
some of your curiosity. Is he's playing through a solid state custom amp,
Okay.
and the sound is so um, clean and anemic, you really
Tepid.
wouldn't, you don't even
Yeah.
really wouldn't really even recognize it as Jeff Beck. Like
Yeah, you would.
if I didn't tell you what it was and I just played you like, what do you think of this guitar player? You'd be like, I mean, it wouldn't be like, yuck, this is horrible or anything.
It would just be meh.
But wouldn't be, it certainly wouldn't be anything that you would say, oh God, I needed to hear that.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So maybe it's better that I
Yeah.
didn't.
I think what's in your mind is probably better than the reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And Cozy's on drums, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
On his
Um,
kit.
um, did you guys get to see that tour with Clapton and Beck in 2010? Did you see any of that?
I did.
When they were actually performing Moon River as an encore.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments I was just like, wow, picking an Andy Williams song, this is trippy. And it was so good. And it really made me realize, wow, these guys are so steeped, like Paul McCartney, steeped in those old standards, those great American songbook songs and stuff like that. And they did such a great job with it.
Mhm.
So when it did get released and the video that got released with it, once again brought me right back and I wept. I really did. It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
It's amazing. Well, it was like the similar story with Over the Rainbow.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was Vinny Colaiuta. I think it was Vinny who said like, they were working on this, and at first he was kind of like, "What the hell?" And then it's like he really listened to it and said like, "I just had to stop what I was doing
Yeah.
and realize this is huge.
Yeah.
This is something." And it's like you think, "Oh, it's Over the Rainbow. What a cheesy song," or something like
Right.
that. And then it's like,
Yeah.
no, this is like he's really, milking this thing for all it's
Yeah.
worth,
One of the
basically.
greatest
I've
melodies.
always loved Moon River personally. So
Yeah, it's a
to me,
great song.
I
I mean,
was I was
a
just
good melody is a good melody, regardless of the context and what have you.
Absolutely.
who plays on the original, the harmonica part? Was that like Toots Thielman or somebody like that? I mean,
Probably.
it's a beautiful like on the original version, like just a beautiful harmonica.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Beautiful. But yeah, so that's how I would tell some, and I have been telling people about the book. I tell everybody I see, you know, have you read this thing, man? You got to read this thing. But
well, thank you.
oh man. And that's what I tell people. I tell them, I go, you're going to read this, whether you're a huge Jeff Beck fan or not, you're going to read this, and then you're going to go back and you're going to listen to the music all the way through, all the chapters, all the years, the decades of his music, and you're going to hear it in a very different way. I hear the Yardbird stuff in a completely different way now,
Yeah,
and it's like they're
One
all
of my
bleeding.
favorite things, revelations that uh I had just while I was writing about it and thinking about it and revisiting Truth and Beckola, those records. I really love early Rod Stewart. Uh,
Hmm.
his solo records. I mean, I loved his singing with Jeff.
Every picture tells a
Every
story.
picture tells a story. I mean, Never a Dull Moment, Gasoline Alley, all those early records. I
Mhm.
just, they hold a special place for me. But the great thing that I always loved about Rod was his sense of humor. And, when you hear him singing straight up blues and Jeff playing with it, again, it's the most playful sort of elevated version of the blues. Like the white guys always approach the blues in such a honest, in such a earnest, like emotional kind of way. And it's just so fun to hear uh, Jeff and Rod again. Like the blues also has lots of humor to
it
it.
does,
Mhm.
definitely. Yeah.
Oh yeah, a lot of fun.
And those guys picked up on that aspect in such a way that was different than, you know, um, I I think what Chris and I sort of strive for is sort of like what we're doing right here, is that we want to have a dialogue about music and we want it to be fun And when people get together and talk about music, this is the stuff that they talk about. They want the insight. They want to like be able to look at the music in a fresh way and enjoy it that way too. So, that was where we were coming from in
Hmm.
in this book, and it feels like that's what you got out of it. So that's a great
Oh
thing.
yeah, it's one of those books that I think I'll revisit a lot. I know I do that with Eruption. I revisit it a lot. It's like a reference tool too. It's like
Yeah.
every once in a
Me too.
while.
I forget some of the stuff that we even did in it, so I
Yeah,
go back.
yeah, yeah. I like I'll
I
listen
go
to,
back.
like I'll pull like for me, Van Halen is the first four albums for me.
Yeah.
Those are seminal records. They are they're all really perfect records, regardless of how much reverb or not.
Right.
You know, um, they're perfect albums. They're just perfect. And every once in a while, I'll think about something and I'll go, and it's like lately I've been really thinking about Alex because he's got this. I'm waiting for this TED Talk to come out, which I think might be a complete another shit show, but we'll see. Um, uh, but I keep thinking about Alex and how at the time nobody realized what a swinging drummer this is.
Hmm.
What an amazing, amazing drummer this is. And it was because of that telekinetic thing that was going on with him and his brother.
Oh
And the
yeah.
fact that they grew up together and they just had this thing of just them. I mean, how many hours must have those guys just played together alone with nobody else to have that thing going on? I mean, when you hear, um, I mean, what's the track? Oh God, off of the second record where he's just swinging. I mean, it's just amazing. It's jazz. It's
Yeah.
jazz.
Yeah.
And I've really been thinking about him a lot lately and saying, not enough people really gave him his flowers over the years, and he really deserves it. He really,
Well,
really does.
sonically, he's really interesting too. And I have to say to your point, I had the great good fortune to actually go to one of Van Halen's rehearsals at an SIR. It was in a fairly large room, but it was still just a room, you know. And this is going to sound totally stupid, but Alex was playing drums, and this was after I'd been listening to Van Halen for years, but being in the same room with him and thinking, oh, that he makes that sound. That's not a thing that's on the record. Like that is his sound. Not only the feel is interesting, but the way he tuned his drums and all of that. He is a very idiosyncratic,
Hmm.
like I put him right up there with like say a Bill Bruford or something like that in terms of having this unique feel and tone, the way his drums sound.
Hmm. Yeah, and Purdy. I'd put him in that category too for
Yeah.
the type
Yeah.
of music that he would
Yeah.
ended up playing. Yeah,
Sure.
I
I think
mean,
you were thinking about "A Love Again," I think was the song. So,
yeah, yeah,
'cause that's probably the most jazzy thing on Van Halen too. So,
yeah. I mean, it's insane.
yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
just
they grew up with their dad, who was a
great
really
jazz
great
musician.
jazz player, they played with their dad a lot. So they were playing clubs and gigs from the time they were, 12, 13 years old. They were
Hmm.
playing, you know, polkas and jazz
Oh yeah,
standards.
they played on the boat on the way over, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane. I mean, I got that from Eruption. You know what I mean? I didn't know that
Cool.
until I read Eruption. You guys are the perfect team to do these type of books. Yes, you're giving us historical documents. You're putting it all together, and you're peeling away the bullshit. The white noise, as we said earlier, right? And I can't be more appreciative of that work. You know what I mean? It's what I kind of try to do when I do these tribute shows, like the one I did with Jeff that you were on, Brad, and stuff like that. It's I need to ask, what's next for you two?
We're working on something and we can't talk about it quite
Okay.
yet.
Yeah, we have people who try to steal our thunder, so
Okay.
we've decided not to show our cards early.
That's
So
fine.
But we're working on a really interesting project. We'll probably be able to let you know in about maybe another 6 months.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
take my money. I'll pay you now and just send it my way when it's ready.
I
And
think
don't.
one thing I wanted to add to what we were talking about earlier was just the perspective of Jeff. That you kind of again when you look at Jeff in little bits and pieces, you kind of missed out on the big picture stuff. And but for me, it was like looking at him with the microscope too.
Yeah.
Was that you see just how much he inspired. I wasn't really aware of how deep his influence was on Jimi Hendrix before we started. I knew there was some influence there, but when you start to really listen to all these tracks and everything, and you go like, "Oh, okay, now I hear like where Hendrix got that from Stone from the Sun. He got that from Happenings 10 years time ago, and same thing with the solo." And Jimmy had even admitted that in Foxy Lady, that little riff that he plays, "Doo-doo," that comes from the solo on Happenings 10 years time ago. And the fact that Jeff, you overlook this stuff because you don't get hit over the head with it. But Jeff was doing all these sound effects on guitar before pretty much almost anybody. I mean, there's little guys that did little things here and there, like wolf whistles or stuff like that, or whatever, like in country music or whatever. But Jeff really made that a big part of his whole thing was that,
Mhm.
whether it's the Big Ben chimes on, Beck's Boogie, or it's the train whistle at the beginning, the train kept a rolling, or the drum sounds, the percussive just muting the strings on I'm a Man at the end. And it goes on throughout his career where he's doing that, the cats and dogs on Ain't Superstitious and
Mhm.
everything. And it's like, yeah, a lot of players are just, again, they were playing guitar. They
Mhm.
were
Well,
like, this is,
heart full of soul, and
the
I mean,
sitar, yeah.
yeah. I
I
mean,
mean, right out the gate, right out the gate. He's got the fuzz box before Keith Richards, and he's got doing the sitar and the raga rock before the Beatles and the Stones and all these other artists that followed with that. It's just he was so far ahead of the game.
yeah. Well, yeah. I love that story that Billy Gibbons told, and I asked him if it was true. Did you really? Did this really happen? And he's, oh yeah. The when they're on tour and Jimmy had his console stereo and they're listening to Truth, and Jimmy calls Billy into the room and he goes, you know this guy?" He goes, "How's he doing this? How do you
Yeah,
think he's doing this?" It's like Jimi Hendrix is asking Billy Gibbons, "How do you think he's doing this?"
yeah, yeah.
It's trippy.
No, it is, and when you look at the timelines and everything you put together, and you realize, yeah, when Happenings 10 years time ago came out and the Yardbirds, all that, Jimmy was on the Chitlin circuit. He was playing pretty much
Right.
straight up R&B,
There was
and blues
yeah.
and everything. And that's where the Jimi Hendrix that we all know and love, you can just see the mind explosion going on where he's like, oh, I'm going to chase this, and go to England
Hmm.
and everything. Jeff lit that spark. He lit the fuse.
Yeah. Oh, like it happened for me, it happened for Jimmy. Oh, I can do this?
Yeah.
I'm allowed to do this?
Yeah, I'm allowed to do this. Yeah.
I'm gonna go and do it. And I don't, I mean, anybody who knows me, I don't sound anything like Jeff Beck, nor will I ever. I don't want to.
Yeah,
I want to sound like me or as close to me as I can find.
absolutely.
Hey guys, I do have to jump.
Yes, I was actually just trying to wrap it up as well.
Okay,
Um,
cool.
guys, thank you for giving me this time to do this, and thank you for this book. Folks, the book is called Blow by Blow, Jeff Beck Story by Brad Tolinski and Chris Gill. It's everywhere. If you don't own it, you're stupid.
We need to put that on the Amazon listing. Mark Davin, if you don't own it, you're
If
stupid.
you don't own this book, you're dumb. Just go get this book and learn. That's one of the things, books are pleasurable, they're wonderful distractions, they're escapism, they're all that. But this book is honestly, this is one of those books like Eruption that could be taught in music appreciation class. This is one of those books. You know what I mean? In college classes.
Yeah.
Turn this into a college course, a Jeff Beck 101. You know, it's brilliant. It's wonderful. I became completely enveloped by it. Oh, real quick. I'm sorry. I know you got to go. Okay, apathy or a peace? Come on now.
Okay.
Okay, because I've met both of them at the Long Island Drum Center in Merrick, New York, when it still existed, and I said, okay. I said to Vin, apathy or a peace? He says it's apathy.
Yes, for Vinny. Now this is what happened. I've mentioned this to Brad because we were doing some early podcasts and we were going between a piece and apathy. I go by a piece because of this story, and this is from Carmine himself. And the reason why I know this is because I remember Carmine doing an interview, I think on KMET back in like the 80s sometime, and he made a big deal about it's a piece, and everything like that. It was Rod Stewart. And it was something to do with because they're playing hockey arenas and everything, and he's introducing the band. And Rod's like, no, it's like, well, I can't do Rod Stewart's voice. I'm going to try and do it. I need to smoke 10 more cigarettes or whatever. But it's like, I have trouble saying, when you say apathy, it gets lost in the echo and the thing. How about if we just say a piece, you know? And like,
So
Carmine's
that's
just
where it
like,
happened.
whatever you want to do, Rod. And so Rod just started calling him Carmine a piece. And because it sounded better in the big reverberant hockey arena over the microphone, that so people could make it out. And that's basically what he stuck with. And so
Right.
Vinny stuck with apathy. And I think Carmine had actually explained that it's actually a pice
A
in the
beach.
proper
Yeah, that
Italian.
makes sense. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I appreciate you so much.
Thanks for having us on, Mark. Really appreciate the conversation. It's a
Yeah,
lot
this
of
is a
fun.
great talk.
Mi casa su casa, and I can't wait for what's next.
Cool.
Cheers.
All right. Peace.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mark.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
Bye. A piece.
A peace.
A pice.